social engagement.
Good evening, everybody. Today is Tuesday, February 20th, 2018. This is a Moscow City regular council meeting. With that, Jim.
Joe, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And the first order of business is the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Gina to approve the consent agenda as it is. Any discussion before I call roll? I'll start with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay. We will move on to item number 2, staff recognition report. Gary Reedner. Gary, do you have anything for us this evening, sir?
Nothing tonight, sir.
Okay. Item number 3 is mayoral appointments. I do not have any this evening. I do have some coming for the next council session, however. So we will move on to item number 4, confirmation of appointment of Mia Valls. Gary Reedner, you have the podium, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're here tonight to present your appointment of Mia Bowles, who's in the front row here. Mia is currently the Senior Deputy Prosecuting Attorney for Latah County. She competed against 13 other applicants for the position of City Attorney, which was vacated when Rod Hall moved away to California. So Mia did very well. Interviewed with the mayor about 2 weeks ago. The mayor has since made his appointment according to Idaho Code and Moscow City Ordinance. Once the mayor makes an appointment, then that name is presented to the city council for confirmation. So I would present to you the name of Mia Bowles as Moscow City Attorney to be sworn in, if successful tonight, at the council meeting on March 19th.
Okay. Discussion from council.
I move that we confirm Mia Valls as Moscow City Attorney.
Second.
Okay, this is making it easy. Catherine made a motion and Gina seconded to confirm Mia Valls as our Moscow City Attorney. I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay, congratulations, Mia. You will be coming the 19th. We'll get you sworn in. Oh, by the way, that's her lovely family up there. Those 3 good-looking kids. Yeah. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that Mia's going to work into the city of Moscow family very, very well, and I'm looking very forward to that, Gary.
Would you like to invite her to make a few comments? Or?
Well, she said she would like to wait until but she's welcome whatever she likes to do, but she is going to plan on giving us something on the 19th. How's that? Okay.
Awesome.
With that, we will move on to item number 5, which is public comment period. And this is the mayor's response period. We run this for 15 minutes. For those folks that want to come up front and tell us what's on their mind, as long as it's something that is not on the agenda this evening, and as long as it's something that is not in front of Board of Adjustment and or Planning and Zoning, please come up, state your name, your address, and let us know what's on your mind. Well, this is the first in a while, I gotta admit that, so I will close the public comment period and move on to item number 6, which is public hearing. C Street Alley right-of-way vacation. Les McDonald will be doing the presentation. Welcome, Les.
Good evening. How are you today?
Great, on this brisk evening.
Risky. Yeah, a little chilly out there today.
Yes.
So Well, this evening we have a series of public hearings, amongst other things, related to some right-of-way vacation requests. And for those that are not that familiar with the process yet, I'll take a minute and just talk about it because they apply to all of them that we're doing this evening. When the city has right-of-way, it's either given to the city through a couple different means, typically through a subdivision plat. Right-of-way is dedicated to the public for use as thoroughfare, as roads, as streets, as pathways. Or sometimes it's done in a fashion where there's a deed of dedication, a separate document. But in either case, and there are others, that right-of-way then, in essence, is utilized by the city for public purposes and for public streets. And so when there's a desire to have the city release that public property and release it back to private ownership, we go through a public hearing process in front of the city council. So you're the board that makes that determination as to whether or not it is in the public benefit to release this publicly used ground back to private hands. Okay? So there's a process in terms that's laid out in the state statutes pertaining to public notice, advertising, sending out letters to folks within a certain distance of the area that's being considered, and then ultimately culminates in a public hearing, which will be what occurs this evening, wherein the council will take any testimony regarding the proposed vacation request and then make a decision as to whether or not they would like to grant that vacation request for the property specified. Within the packets, you'll see draft ordinances that address the conditions and the reasoning behind a vacation and where the property will go. Typically, it is split down the middle, but the state statutes allow us to dictate one side or the other in any form the council chooses to do so. Normally, we look back and try to find kind of what was the origin of the property. If it's in a subdivision and there's lots on both sides, pretty easy. You split it down the middle, it goes to both sides. Sometimes the right-of-way is on the edge of a subdivision or it was done through a deed of dedication, and it may not have come from property that's on one side but all from the other. And so then we put it to the other. So, I mean, just different techniques depending on the situations. The ones we've got tonight are all fairly straightforward, but we'll touch on those as we go through them. One other thing to talk about, I guess, is that in these processes, because it is a public hearing, providing any kind of input outside of the public hearing setting is typically frowned upon. That's why when we were at Public Works Finance Committee last time, even though it's a portion of the council, it was a very simple presentation of this is what's coming, we're scheduling a public hearing, so that we can provide all of the information to the council in its full form in the public hearing setting tonight. Okay. So to start with, we have the C Street Alley right-of-way vacation. This is a small request that's being granted by one property owner. And just to help orient you, this is C Street here, running east-west across the screen, Home Street and Circle Drive in this area. And we have platted right-of-way here for an alley, and there's also an alley here. And that right-of-way in this case is 16 feet wide. It is, as shown here on the aerial, kind of running between a couple of homes, and it's this 807 address on C Street that's made, the owner of this has made the request that we vacate 1.17 feet of the east side of this 16-foot alley right-of-way. It's not a very big piece, but it's just a sliver along the east side. And so the area of vacation is what is shown here in yellow, so it's very narrow, 1.17 feet along that easterly edge of the right-of-way, and only along their frontage, which runs from the C Street right-of-way here on the north side to this point here. They actually own portions of two lots here and here in the original plat. So it's 110 feet by 1.17 feet wide. It's a couple of shots of what it looks like. These are actually provided by the applicant in their application package, and their packet that they submitted to the city is in your council packet this evening. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at that. But this is a view from C Street looking to the south. So the right-of-way is this area right in here. It's, again, 16 feet wide. Between the buildings here, it's roughly 17 and a half, 18 feet. And so they're really looking for just a portion that would run, again, 1.17 feet on the easterly edge along that area. This, as you can tell, is undeveloped right-of-way. There's no road through here. There's no utilities that the city has. There are overhead power facilities. You can see a power pole right here. So there are power lines that run along C Street, but also run north-south in this area. The vacation request area does not lie underneath the utilities for the overhead, and so it should not affect those in any way. And again, we have no city utilities or any other underground utilities located within this right-of-way. One of the things we always look at, is there any need to preserve this right-of-way for future purposes if it's not currently being used for its original intended purpose, being some kind of a transportation corridor. In this case, it has not been developed, and part of the reason for that is once you get back about right here, then it drops off pretty sharply to the south, down the hill, and eventually ties into that east-west alley that I showed you on one of the earlier maps. So we're not anticipating that this, at least staff is not anticipating that this right-of-way would be used for any kind of road extension in the future. We do think there is some potential that it could be used for perhaps some underground utilities, whether it be a storm line or a sewer facility of some type. Possibly it could be used for a pathway system, although I'm not sure the origin destination at this point. So it's something that we typically in Public Works do not really care to vacate city right-of-way because you don't know what the demand upon it's going to be in 15 or 20 years per se. We're here for the long haul, of course, but there are occasions where we do support right-of-way vacations. This is one of them. We don't feel that this would hinder the city's use of this area. The ordinance does preserve the right of use for utilities, both current and future, that would be within that 16-foot alley, in essence creating a 1.17-foot wide easement for utilities in what would be vacated alley area. So we'd still retain that ability to run utilities down through this corridor if there was a need to do so. And that's it. Fairly simple, and the applicant may be here, but I have not run. Yes, they are, and I'm sure they would love to come up and
Well, we're going to hang on just a second.
state their
here,
case when
Les.
you get to that point.
Yeah.
So.
Question for you on this alley. How many years has this alley been there? That looks like a house that's been around for about 80 or 90 years.
I believe the house has been there for probably since about the 1940s, somewhere in that
long, long
era,
time.
so quite a while. The plat itself goes back quite a bit further. I think it's in the early 1900s or late 1800s, that original plat in that area. So the alley itself has been platted a long time.
Council has questions for Les before I open the public hearing. Okay, thank you, Les. I will open the public hearing at 7:12, and I'd like to hear from Mr. Middlestad. And I hope I didn't butcher your name, sir. Please come up and tell us a little bit about yourself and what's on your mind here.
Thank you. So the origin of our request is related to this property, 807, I think it's West C. Okay. So this property was originally configured as a duplex property and has since, through several previous owners, been converted to a single-family home. But due to changes in city ordinances, the lot size is now smaller than that necessary for a duplex. And my wife and I would have purchased this property with the goal of returning it to its original configuration as a duplex property. But we would like to have this small sliver of vacation to bring us up to 7,000 square feet, which will bring us in compliance with the city ordinance for a duplex property. And with the goal of, like I said, returning the property to its original configuration and providing hopefully high-quality housing in a tight housing market that is not necessarily geared towards students, which is a rare situation in Moscow. And so that's the origin of the request. I'm happy to answer any questions if any members of the council have them.
Any questions for the applicant before we move on? I think you're in good shape. Well, if something comes up, we'll return you back to the podium, sir.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, I take testimony for anybody that is in favor of this application. Please come forward. Or anybody that would like to come up and tell us what's on their mind. General comments or opposed to this, please state your name and let us know what's on your mind. We'll give you 3 minutes, sir. And your address as well.
Mr. Mayor and City Council persons and Mr. McDonald, I'm glad to speak in opposition. I am the neighbor next door.
Your name, sir?
My name is J.E. Freeland, and I reside at 815 West C Street, the property which is to the west and adjacent to the right-of-way. If you look at the exhibit, my home is the flat white roof on the west side of the right-of-way. And my property is unique insofar as that with the configuration of this development, I'm kind of the one with the long property parcel that's landlocked. And so we rely upon the right-of-way for our home. We have a lower basement apartment, and the ingress and egress is accessed off, and historically has been since the home was built in 1956. And also, I have great concern because the fire hydrant, which services our properties, is in front of the 807 property, and to restrict the access for city fire personnel to my whole property would be affected by a favorable decision. So years ago I had Mr. Button. I've lived here for 16 years. I had Chief Button, who was the fire chief here. Many of you may know him. And he came out personally at my request, and he measured out, he looked over the whole property. He showed me where the fire hydrant was and how far the hoses could reach. And they do reach through this corridor, through this right-of-way, to the rear of my property. However, my property is so long, it goes all the way down to the alley. It's kind of the long, narrow property in this development. The fire hoses could not reach. There's an outbuilding, and further, the large trees, most of which are 150 feet tall, 120 feet tall, that were planted there in the 50s. And so, at any rate, to the extent that this change would affect my property, I'm concerned.
Okay. Would you please wrap it up, sir?
Yes, we also had a fire in one of the trees a few years ago, and I called the city. City called Avista, and there was a smoldering fire because the lines were, one of them fell, the live wire, and set the tree on fire. Avista had to come out and repair that. They needed with all their personnel, they needed the full extent of this right-of-way. And I'm concerned that also that this is, I've met my neighbors and I like them very much, but I think this is not in the public interest. There's an historic reason why this right-of-way has existed.
Mr. Freeland, I'm going to stop you, sir, because we're over 4 minutes, but I do have a question to ask. Is that the property you're talking about that's yours?
Yes, it is.
So this is C Street,
Yes.
so you've got access to your house from the front of the street, isn't that correct? You have access to the front of that? off the front of that house to the street right up there?
I do, yes. That's not the question. The question
No, I
is
was just was
access.
asking you a question. Because
Yes.
you said that your lot goes way down
It
into here
does.
somewhere, and that's what you're
Correct.
concerned is these trees right here.
Well, also, in the lower basement of my home is the furnace, there's a kitchen. If those ever caught on fire, I need the city personnel to be able to respond appropriately. And also, I'm just concerned that I've read the petition, and I'm just concerned that this is really not in the public interest, but it's a unjust enrichment. And I think that, I don't know if the city really has the legal.
Mr. Freeland, I'm going to ask you to stop. Thank you. You've talked for over 5 minutes, and I restricted
thank-
to 3,
thank
so I
you,
gave you
Mr.
plenty
Mayor.
of time, but I did have a question I wanted to ask you, so
Yes.
thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Okay.
I would be more than happy to take other testimony up front here.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, John Freeland. He's my dad. I grew up in that house there. I think the bigger issue is here, beyond the city right-of-way, is that lot right behind the house there could potentially be divided for another house in the future. And if that right-of-way, if their request was granted, I'm not sure that the alley could still be constructed. It's true that it's a little bit steep coming off of there, down if you go a little bit down the alley in terms of the property. But when Ed came out years ago, we were thinking about, selling the house and getting a different house in town at that point in time. And he said that if we were to sell it and also sell the lot behind, we would have to construct an alley and be cut from the C Street there down for property access to that lot based on where that fire hydrant is. Because if you see, the lot extends all the way down to that alley. You can kind of see the line there right before the gravel, 3/4 of the way down the picture there. And there's no fire hydrant anywhere near the southern part of the property there. So in terms of fire access, for us to potentially seek to divide the property in the future and get value out of that piece of land, as the guy next door said, in a tight housing market, potentially building another building another house there, having a different property there. In terms of fire access, we need to have the alley preserved as it currently is. So I would ask less if, potentially that, if that 1 foot would restrict, fire access to that property, and that might be a question for the new fire chief as well. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. I'm in opposition until I hear a good argument or my concerns are addressed. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Other testimony? Okay, I'll close the hearing. Oh,
No, we have somebody coming.
come on up, ma'am, if you want to. Tell us your name and your address, please.
Hi, my name is Mary Ingles. My husband is Eric Milstead. So I'm petitioner on this request. Just a couple of points of clarification, I think, and perhaps this is really a question for Les, but I believe that the access to the fire hydrant, that is city property that goes from the front of our property to the edge of the street. And so in my understanding, there would be no restriction or restricted access to that fire hydrant. Is that correct?
Go ahead, Les.
Yeah, that is correct. The fire hydrant is within the C Street right-of-way, so it runs along that area. It's either within or very near to, but typically they are within the C Street right-of-way, and so there should not be any hindrance to access to the hydrant from the street.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, as my husband stated, the vacation request is this desire to bring us into compliance with the current city regulations. We have no plans to do any kind of development on that 1.17 feet of property. We also are happy to ensure that there is easement for anybody who actually needs to make use of that, for fire access, for utility access, for whatever, however it needs to be used. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ingles. Okay, I will close the hearing at 7:25, and a question for both Les and Bill Belknap. Bill, do you see any issues with it as far as that alley depth and the length of it up here? I'm guessing the fire hydrant's up here somewhere, I'm guessing.
Correct. The fire hydrant's in the public right-of-way in front of 807.
Okay. The width of this alley, and I don't know, this is kind of a steep embankment kind of down here. If this 1 foot is vacated, is there issue with that being able to be developed back here? Because I have no idea what the square footage of it.
So if I may, I haven't looked at the development of that individual property, but underneath the International Fire Code, fire access has a minimum width of 20 feet. And I understand that alley is currently 16 feet in width. So I don't think that currently just the alley on its own would be adequate for fire access to the rear of the property. That property also likely could not be divided off the back, the Freeland property, where they discussed the desire to divide off a portion of the southern portion of the property. Underneath the city code, all lots have to have frontage on a public street. So for a standard lot, it's a minimum frontage of at least 40 feet. For a flagpole lot, it would have to be a minimum of 20 feet. And so I do not know the distance between the westerly right-of-way line of that alley and their existing home, or whether they have property or, width on the west side of their home in order to accomplish that. But if they wanted to do a flagpole lot, they'd have to have 20 feet of their own frontage that would be tied to that rear portion, and that flagpole cannot exceed more than 150 feet in width. So I guess the two things are 150 feet in length. So I guess the two things I guess to clarify is that that alley does not currently meet fire access, and I do not think that the fire department would likely accept that in its current width to provide access to the rear portion of the property, even in its current 16 feet in width, unless the owner made some additional width of their property available and they could provide that 20 feet in width. And they could not separate off a separate lot in the back portion of the property unless they could have a flagpole that would extend up to C Street to provide the required 20 feet of minimum frontage, or potentially receive some sort of, variance from that requirement, which I think would be very difficult to obtain.
Okay, so that is 16 feet wide right there.
The current platted width of that alley is 16 feet.
Okay, so
correct.
it has not been in compliance. Perhaps that's why it's never been built on.
Well, all those properties currently have fire access from C Street, and the fire truck could reach the majority of that property from C Street and maybe using some of the alley for personnel, but not necessarily for fire vehicles to gain that access. So they have the access that they are required to have. The question would be, if you're to develop something on the southern portion of that property, could you gain adequate fire access for the fire department to approve a new structure being placed there? And currently, underneath the fire code, that fire access has to be a minimum of 20 feet in width.
Okay. Okay, let's turn it over to the council. I just wanted to get a few of those things verified. Jim?
I have a question for Bill. If they were to divide this lot out and then provide access from down this way, the alley would not be suitable? It would have to be converted to a city street or city right-of-way?
Correct. That would not satisfy the requirement of the lot having frontage on a public street. We did pass an amendment a few years ago to exempt out a few pre-existing legal non-conforming lots that only had alley access, but that did not grant the allowance of creating new lots that only had alley access. So they would need to somehow accomplish that flagpole minimum 20 feet of frontage. It doesn't mean that they couldn't develop on the rear portion of the property. In the R3 district, you can have multiple structures on that lot, but they just couldn't separate it and divide it off as a separate lot. And they may not be able to develop on that southern portion of the property unless they can provide adequate fire access in some form.
How close is the fire access on this end?
Well, one of the things to keep in mind here is what you see in this area. This is not an alley. This is all private. So the 16-foot alley we're looking at comes from C Street and extends all the way down to this intersection with an east-west alley here. And so that is the extent of the public right-of-way within the plat. And so there's a portion of this that is being used as driveway, and serving these couple of homes, that is gravel today. I'm not sure that how much of that's actually in the alley right-of-way. Looks like it kind of drifts into this adjacent parcel here. So that would be the other access point, if you would, to this alley and potentially to a southern portion of this lot, where if fire service could come through here and possibly come some distance up this. I'm not as familiar with the topography down here, but I'm assuming since it's being used, it's probably not too steep as compared to, it's a pretty steep section right about in here. And so that would be the other closest point for potential fire truck access, is if they could come in here, possibly up here a little ways, and help cut that distance. Again, probably for personnel to go from the vehicle to the site, as would be the case here. You're not going to bring a vehicle down this area as it exists today.
Is the width of the alley down here, is it the same, or
It
is it
is.
wider down here?
No, it's 16-foot right-of-way all the way through.
All the way through?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Bill, you mentioned that a flagpole lot can't be more than 150 feet wide, or I'm sorry, long. Do you happen to know the plot size there?
Well, the vacation request is 110 feet in length, is that correct? So that yellow line gives you the general reference, but I don't know the full length of that entire lot.
Okay.
As I recall, each of these lots, I believe, is 50 feet wide in a north-south direction, here, here, and here. And then the last one is 60, thus the 110-foot combination in that area. So that would, from that point, would be approximately another 100 feet down to what I believe is their southerly property line.
So it might
for
be
that
210
parcel.
feet in length.
Overall, about 210.
Randy?
So am I understanding correctly that currently they would not be permitted to build on the southern part of that lot, and the only way would be if that alley were to be converted to a city street at some point?
Well, I would clarify, they could build on that southern portion if they could provide suitable fire access acceptable to the fire department. So there is a difference between dividing it off as a separate lot for sale or adding another structure on that existing lot. So you couldn't divide another lot off for sale unless you could somehow get that minimum 20 feet of street frontage for that lot in a flagpole configuration. If you could not achieve that, then you could place another structure on that lot. The R3 district does allow multiple structures per lot, but you could not get that another structure permitted unless a fire department approved of it and had adequate fire access to provide fire suppression services to that new structure. And right now, all we have is a 16-foot wide alley where the fire code would dictate that that access would need to be 20 feet in width. So either the fire department would have to provide an exception or additional right-of-way would need to be obtained to have that 20-foot fire access width to serve that new structure.
And it appears that if they were to consider an exception, they may prefer the southern approach anyways. That's a possibility.
That would be my
structure.
perception, that just because of the topography, that would be the only feasible approach. The difficulty you run into is you'll have a structure that will likely be addressed on C Street that is going to be gained off that rear alley. So that's where it makes it difficult, and really why lots need to have frontage on a public street. So if you're responding to an incident, that they know where they're going to and have access to that structure. But that does not mean that access necessarily has to be gained by that street. And the fire department would just have to be aware of that and have that in the response protocol.
Mr. Mayor?
Jim?
Maybe this is a question for Mr. Freeland, but does he own property on this side 20 feet wide? Would you be able to provide a 20-foot wide access, fire access on the west side of your property to that lot?
You need to answer from the podium.
Yep. Come on up, Mr. Freeland, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. No, there's a separate neighbor, and we only have about, from the house, the white roof, we have about 4 feet, perhaps, before the property line. And there's trees and shrubbery and bushes. We don't really have any
I think that's the
access.
line right there, right here, Jim.
It's right here, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Our access is on the east. We don't have any on the west.
Thank you, Mr. Freeland.
So if he wanted to separate this as a flagpole lot, he would have to acquire 20 feet of access on this side in order to make that work. Is that correct, Bill?
That would be one option, provided that there is room that could be acquired. There are setbacks that need to be required on each of
Right,
the
you have to meet the
structures.
setback requirements. It seems like it's not much more than 20 feet there to begin with.
That's what I would estimate. There's probably not much more than that, and there are minimum setbacks, minimum lot widths, and minimum lot areas that all
Never
need to be
happened from
maintained.
that place right there, you wouldn't have enough room. Catherine?
No questions?
Ann? Okay. Okay, so how would council like to move forward with this?
I have one other
Okay,
question.
Randy?
Maybe it's kind of a long shot. I think we're all trying to, come up with possibilities, if there are any other. This more south of where they're requesting the vacation, in that portion of the alley, could it ever be a possibility in the future for there to be a vacation request for that entire portion to then become a 20-foot wide vacated
Well,
portion?
you still run into the property right here, which is gonna be problematic for you as well, Randy. See that line right there?
Is your question, could there be an additional 4-foot dedication to allow for a 20-foot fire access?
Right.
There's always a potential that the adjoining property owner could purchase or obtain another 4 feet.
Right. That's what I'm asking.
And then it would all depend how they were going to configure it, what the access was, so on and so forth.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Mayor, since the existing right-of-way does not meet fire code at this point, and another foot taken off of it doesn't make any difference, I guess I would have to move that we approve the vacation request by adoption of the draft ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that the ordinance be read by title and published by summary.
Second, with just the correction in the ordinance that, is it west or east? Because I heard
It's
them-
west. It is
Okay, so in the ordinance it says east, I think.
Okay, we got a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine to approve the vacation required by the adoption of the draft ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and the ordinance be read by title and published by summary, as long as it's on the west, and I'll take a look at that ordinance.
Page
We'll
10.
start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, the vacation is granted. Let me read this ordinance. This is ordinance number 2018-1. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, providing for the vacation of a portion of the public alley right-of-way within the City of Moscow legally described in Section 1 of this ordinance, providing that the title be said vacated right-of-way shall vest with the owners of the property as specified in Section 3 of this ordinance, and providing that this ordinance shall be in full force and effect from and after passage, approval, and publication according to law. We good over there, Lori? All right, we will move on to the next item, number 7, public hearing on Rayburn Street right-of-way vacation. Les does this presentation as well.
Good evening again. One other item that I did not mention in my little primer on right-of-way vacations earlier that I should mention is under state statutes, the city is not able to condition right-of-way vacations. And by that I mean that we cannot ask for something in return, such as a monetary compensation or some other action. And so that's something that it's very important that everybody
It either
understands.
happens or it does not happen.
It happens or it doesn't happen. We can retain things such as an easement and some rights, but we can't ask for something else in return. So, just so, I meant to mention that earlier and failed to do so. Okay, our next one this evening for right-of-way vacations is the Rayburn Street vacation. This is a request that has come from the University of Idaho, and Dan Ebert is here this evening as well, and I believe he'll probably choose to speak during the hearing when it is opened. So similar process, of course, we're looking at, in this case, property on the north end of the University of Idaho. This is State Highway 8, Pullman Road, and the piece we're talking about is this little bit right here of kind of a dashed right-of-way. Blue line represents the relocated and reconstructed portion of Paradise Creek that was built a few years back, and that's important because it really affected this right-of-way and what was an existing street in the area. So if we go clear back to 1992, and you look at what used to be out here on the university, this is Rayburn Street coming all the way up past the 2 railroad tracks, tying into the highway system at that point. And so it was an active street back in those days, and then just kind of working our way forward. 1996, still there. You can see there are no sidewalks on either side of it. It's just kind of a rural road section roaming across the railroad tracks and the railroad right-of-way. The Student Rec Center eventually got built, parking added along the east side of it. The road was still there. And then things started to happen where we were dealing with pathway systems. The railroad here went away. We were starting to work on path systems to address what would eventually become a new intersection here with signalized crossings for all the pedestrians. Y'all remember that, that period of time when people were running across the highway. And then the university, in conjunction with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, reconstructed Paradise Creek here, essentially creating an open channel to complement the underground portion of the creek that runs along Paradise Creek Street down here off the edge of the screen. And with that, and about the same time, Stadium Way was extended up to the highway, new bridges installed, a new intersection at Peterson and Stadium Way and State 8. And then Rayburn Street, as it existed all those years, was removed. So the only thing that's still there today, you can just see it right there, that little line crossing, that's a sanitary sewer main that the city owns that crosses from north to south and ties into a big sewer system that runs right through this area. And so with the creek, then all the crossings went away, the road went away, the pedestrian routes all went away, and that is just a creek. And so that's generally, it's 2015, it's the last aerial I had. That is what it looks like generally today. Vegetation is starting to come to fruition along the corridor. You can still see that sewer line just barely right there. Just to help orient, Wendy's is right here across the way. Drive in, drive out. And the area here in the red hatching is generally representative of the area that's being requested for vacation. It's essentially north of the pathway that comes down through there, and it really covers the areas that were part of the original railroad rights-of-way that came through here. And the city acquired this some years ago as the railroad started phasing out, so that it became right-of-way. So the university has requested that we vacate that area. In this case, the university now owns both pieces of right-of-way, the northerly one here, the southerly one here, that abut the right-of-way area on both east and west sides in its entirety. So they own all the property east, west, and south of this right-of-way vacation. To the north, of course, is additional right-of-way for State Highway 8. Just a quick shot. This was 2007, I believe, from the Google on-street views, what it used to look like with the rail crossing and when it was paved, looking towards the south. And that's about 2 years ago or so. And the creek is, of course, in here now. The pathway beyond it, you can't quite see it, but the road obviously terminates, and it's just a creek today. So the university is making the request, as they anticipated the city probably has no further need of this for a roadway, that we vacate it. And again, the draft ordinance does retain easements upon the right-of-way for the purpose of utilities.
That brings a question, Les, is that sewer line that goes right along here somewhere, is that still active, or is that something we've...
It is active, yeah. It runs pretty much along this kind of easterly edge of the right-of-way and then ties to the mains. That is active. It serves that north side of the highway.
Okay, is there any issue if we vacate this?
By retaining an easement,
So we keep the easement
can
on
continue
it?
to have it there. 'Em. there.
Okay.
And just fine.
Questions for Les? Okay, I think we'll go ahead and, oh, were you done, Les? I'm sorry.
I forgot I had this one. That was
Oh.
just a rough representation of where that right-of-way
Where it
would
was
be,
before.
give or take. So, yeah, that was it.
How much land is it?
Ooh, we'll have to look at that. It's actually in the ordinance, in the legal description, right at the bottom. About .31 acres, roughly.
Thank you.
So a third, a little less than a third. Okay. I will open the, thank you, Les, public hearing at 7:44, and Mr. Dan Ewert is here, so the applicant, so please come up and share with us what the university's thoughts are. Dan?
Mr. Mayor, council members, good evening. My name is Dan Ewert. I'm the Vice President for Information Technology at the University of Idaho, and I live at 2187 Westview Drive. I think Les did a great job of describing what we're requesting. We would hate to see the good work between the city and other groups and us in the development of the riparian zone through there, in the pathway process ever, we don't want this to become a street. I don't think we need that to be a street anymore with the great improvements there on Stadium Drive. And of course, we'd be glad to support any utility easements and those kinds of things as appropriate. But like I said, I think Les did a great job of describing it, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have from the university perspective.
Any questions for Dan, from anybody? Thanks, Dan. I think everybody's, oh, you got something,
I
Jim?
just wondered if does the university have any development ideas for that since it would be a continuous piece now? Any development ideas that you would want to put into place if you acquired this?
Yeah, Councilmember Bolin, we, in our long-range campus development plan, we would love to see some frontage improvements right there along the Pullman Highway, but those are well in the future, and there's certainly nothing either short or medium term as far as development goes, right there along the highway. The area, the rest of the area, no, we do not see any development in there, because again, all of us have invested in the riparian zone and the trails through there.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Others who would like to come up and testify, either for or against or in general, please come up and we'll give you 3 minutes. Seeing nobody race to the podium, I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:46 and turn it over to council for deliberation. Brandy?
Well, I would say, I think with the riparian area and it makes sense to not have a piece that could disrupt the continuity there. And so it makes sense to me to restore or preserve that to be contiguous with its surroundings.
Okay.
I have a question for Bill or Les or whoever. There would be no access to the highway allowed from that if it was developed in any way from that point, would there? You'd have to, I mean, that's a state highway. I'm sure there's restricted access.
It seems pretty unlikely. I mean, it would be the decision of the Idaho Transportation Department as to whether or not they would allow new driveway access onto the highway. Typically, they prefer not to do that, so they would be looking for alternative means to service it. It is a pretty long piece if you consider running all the way to Line Street. And so depending on if there was development here north of the creek, someday, is there a possibility there could be a driveway, at some point? I suppose it is possible, but that's something that would really depend upon how the property was being developed, what kind of ingress and egress was needed, and whether or not the state would approve that access. Otherwise, they would probably encourage them to look at coming to the side streets, if you will, that already have access to the highway. A bit challenging with this particular configuration, but yeah, hard to say at this point because it would be an ITD decision ultimately.
No, so it's not something that the city of Moscow would have control over in terms of access off the highway.
And Catherine, questions? Okay. Gina?
I'm good.
Okay. Well,
I move we approve the vacation request by adoption of the draft ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that the ordinance be read by title and published by summary.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Catherine, a second by Gina to approve the vacation request by adoption of the draft ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that the ordinance be read by title and published by summary. I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay, now I will read this ordinance, which is 2018-2. Ordinance 2018-02, an ordinance of the City of Moscow, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, providing for the vacation of a portion of public street right-of-way located within the City of Moscow and legally described in Section 1 of this ordinance, providing that the title to said vacated public right-of-way shall vest with the owners of the property as specified in Section 3 of this ordinance, and providing that this ordinance shall be in full force and effect from and after passage, approval, and publication according to law. So there it is. Now we will move on to item number 8, and this is a little bit interesting one. Before you get going, Bill, I want to chat for a minute about this because there's 3 actual actions that need to take place in here. If you read in your packet, A, B, and C. C being the public hearing, and so we have to come to a conclusion on A and B before we can make a decision on the public hearing and opening, because if we don't have those, the public hearing cannot happen. Is that correct, Gary?
Yes, they need to happen in sequence. If you approve the lot division, it will be contingent upon granting the variance from street standards for the hammerhead turnaround, which, because it requires new right-of-way, you vacate right-of-way to allow it to use for that. So yes, they're all in sequence.
Okay. Bill, you have the podium, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. So as you introduce this topic, there are 3 specific items. The first is the item that I'll be covering, which is going to cover the lot division itself. And then we have the engineering variance to allow for the hammerhead turnaround as a public turnaround, and then the vacation hearing that you're now very familiar with, having doing 2 of those. So there are a few moving parts to this one, but we'll try to give you a little bit of history on the property. So this is the property in question that we're talking about. So Orchard Avenue is located here to the east of the property, and Hershey Road is located to the north, and then we have the Highland Drive loop, and then a short stub street called Landy Lane that abuts up to the south of the property. The property itself is located within the R2 zoning district, which is our medium-density, single-family residential zone. So most of the properties to the northwest here and to the south are also zoned R2. We have some farm ranch outdoor recreation just to the northwest, and to the west of the property. Some R3 here kind of to the far southeast of the property, and then some suburban residential for the majority of the Christopher Crossing subdivision located to the north, and then some ag forest here distant off to the west. Now, this property was a part of the Christopher Crossing subdivision. So that subdivision included the lots off of Christopher Lane and Hershey, a few lots off here in the south, and this was a portion that was tied to that overall subdivision plat when it was developed back in 2000. It ran into some financial difficulties, and that portion of the plat was never completed. So the public improvements were completed for the rest of the subdivision, but this little portion was not. And it was proposed to be accessed off the end of Landy Lane, and there was going to be a cul-de-sac that would be constructed at the end of Landy, and there were 2 lots that were platted on that portion of the property. Shortly after that was platted in 2000 and the subdivision was completed, this became a property that was difficult to complete. There are some utility lines and some grade issues that necessitated some retaining walls on the side of the cul-de-sac. And the developer at that time and future developers identified that it really was not financially viable to develop that property given all those constraints. There also are both storm and sanitary sewer lines that need to be extended up Landy from Highland Drive to serve the lots. So there was a lot of development costs, a lot of development challenges that in developing in just a 2-lot configuration was not deemed to be financially viable. In addition to the 2 lots that were platted, there was also a pedestrian easement that was granted. So there is a pedestrian walkway, sidewalk that's been constructed from the street to the north to the northern boundary of this property. And then there was an easement that was granted to allow for that pedestrian easement to cross the property, reach the Landy Lane right-of-way, and continue south towards Highland Drive. After that was determined to be not feasible for development in its current configuration in 2007, the city was approached with a proposed lot division proposal that would take the 2 lots and convert them into 3. That proposal modified that cul-de-sac to extend the roadway farther north into the property to get away from the utility lines and grade issues and place the cul-de-sac in a little bit of a modified configuration located farther north into the property. There were 2 flagpole lots then that were going to gain access at the northern end of that cul-de-sac, and then a third lot that would be located a little bit farther to the south. And so these were proposed to be the 3 building lots in that configuration. There was also a remnant parcel here located on the east side of the proposed cul-de-sac, and the discussion at that time was that that was likely going to be sold to adjacent property owners located to the east of the proposed cul-de-sac. So that was approved by the council in 2007. There were a number of conditions. One included rerouting that pedestrian easement to allow for the continued route for connectivity to that sidewalk to continue down to Landy Lane. But that was approved in 2007 and then really has sat since that time. So this was the configuration that resulted from that lot division. These were the 3 lots that were approved. This was that remnant parcel. There was a pedestrian easement that was granted here along the northerly property line to provide a pedestrian route to the proposed new right-of-way. There was new right-of-way that was dedicated beyond just the prior cul-de-sac to allow for that cul-de-sac construction. And then there was a small vacation on the side of that cul-de-sac that previously was platted in the Christopher's Crossing subdivision. So that was kind of how it stands right now from the last approval. So legally, we have essentially all of this property in private ownership, this in private ownership, and this right-of-way exists, and this pedestrian easement exists today. The proposal before you this evening is to modify that again, to reconfigure it into 4 building lots with a alternate hammerhead turnaround. And that is something that the current owner of the property feels is going to fit the site and make it much more economically viable to develop the property. There would be 4 individual building lots that would be a little bit more regular in shape, not quite the flagpoles that existed previously. And then this remnant portion that was located on the east side of the prior cul-de-sac, the request is to vacate right-of-way. That would be added to this property, and that would then be a resulting building lot. So just to look at a little bit more closely, there are 4 building parcels that are proposed. They range from about a little over 8,000 square feet in size to about 13,700 square feet in size. So they're all well within the required 7,000 square foot minimum lot size. And then this plus area here is the proposed right-of-way dedication to accommodate the hammerhead turnaround. So as I noted before, there was a previous pedestrian easement that would extend and connect to the then dedicated right-of-way to provide that pedestrian route. The proposal before you this evening would include the dedication of a new pedestrian easement that would continue along in that east-west direction, then head south to tie into the proposed public right-of-way dedication, shown there in red. The area in the tan shading is then the area that is going to be requested for vacation, that would be added to the remnant parcel to create the 4th building lot. And again, the 3 lots then that would exist on the west side of the property. As I mentioned, this is zoned R2. This is the single-family zoning district. The minimum lot width is 60 feet. The minimum lot area is 7,000 square feet. 4 flagpole lots, and the 2 westernmost parcels are flagpoles. They are required to abut the public street right-of-way for a minimum distance of 20 feet, and they have a maximum length of 150 feet in length. All the proposed lots in this configuration before this evening meet all the minimum requirements as specified in the zoning code. This request was reviewed by the Public Works Finance Committee at their February 12th meeting, at which time the committee made a recommendation for approval of the lot division itself. The other items are before the full council for their consideration. Staff's recommendation this evening is to approve the lot division request with 4 specific conditions. The first is the vacation of the right-of-way and the engineering variance are approved by the City Council. Without those, this doesn't function, this does not work. The second is the applicant dedicates the additional right-of-way necessary for that proposed hammerhead turnaround configuration. There is some right-of-way that needs to be dedicated to the west of the existing right-of-way dedication to make that occur and to provide for that public turnaround. 3, that the applicant grants that additional pedestrian 15-foot wide pedestrian easement between lots 3 and 4 to allow for that continuation of the existing easement south to the new proposed right-of-way boundary. And the fourth, which is that all public improvements are constructed, including the pedestrian walk through the easement, or the developer enters into a development agreement with security posted to secure those improvements prior to any building permits being issued upon the subject property. So with that, that ends my presentation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that the
Kind of a
council may
fun
have.
thing about that, I remember in 2000 when I was on planning and zoning for the first time, and we heard this, and people have been trying to make this thing work for almost 2 decades that I know of, because I was on council in 2007 at that time, Bill, but I'll turn over to council here. What do you want, your questions for Bill?
I have a question.
Catherine?
Can you pull the,
I can.
yeah, the picture, or that,
This one?
well, so did the landowners, when it was in the configuration of the 3 lots, did the landowners to the east ever express interest in wanting to purchase?
I don't recall if they were present at the meetings back in 2007 at that time. I think the applicant may have represented that they'd had conversations with them, and they were discussing a deal to have them purchase that additional property.
But it never went anywhere?
To my knowledge, they still own that property there to the east.
Okay, thanks.
Gina?
I had a question about the hammerhead turn, or hammerhead turnaround, whatever you called it.
That's
I
going
need
to be on B.
On B, so I should wait?
Well, because we're going to talk about that
Okay.
next. We're going to deal
I
with
can
A
wait.
first.
Okay.
Anybody want to kick a motion out on this, on the 4 conditions?
Sure, I would move that we accept the lot division, including the 4 conditions listed on the screen.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Jim and a second by Catherine to approve the lot division with these 4 requirements and conditions.
Can we ask a question about?
You
the
sure can,
condition?
if you got a question.
So in that condition, you know, number 4, where it says, or the developer enters into a development agreement, we do that often?
It's a very typical form
Yeah.
of making.
Sure.
There are 2 options. Sometimes the sequencing of a development doesn't make sense to complete the public improvements before certain phases of construction of the buildings. So that is always an option that they could present, that they would like to be able to obtain a building permit before completing all those public improvements. And if they chose to do that, we would bring a development agreement before the council. It would identify the public improvements they're required to complete, a value for that, and a security amount, and they would have to provide that security, and that would allow for the building permits to be issued. It also give them a specified time frame to complete those public improvements. Typically, it's 9 to 12 months that they must be completed within.
Yeah, thank you.
At the Public Works meeting, I remember a woman in the Hershey development asking if that pedestrian easement was going to connect to the end of the existing sidewalk there, and I believe, Les, you said that would be a connection, is that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that easement ties into the existing sidewalk. They're located to the north. I guess on this diagram, that sidewalk ends right here. So this is the existing 20-foot pedestrian and utility easement that heads north. So that sidewalk terminates right here, and so it would be pick up, turn around, and come down.
Okay, we all good? We have a motion and a second. Everybody understand what we're doing here? I'll start to roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, we got A, then let's move on to B with the street standards allow the hammerhead turnaround. Is Les presenting that one? Or are you doing that, Bill?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Les.
Hello again. Yeah, the second item on the list for this particular development, as Bill explained, is the variance to the street standards. As he noted, the cul-de-sac is our typical street standard, and we are referring to the drawings that are within the city council adopted standard construction drawings. That's what we're referring to, and these are the drawings that specify how things that are going to be public facilities must be constructed. So within that is this particular plan set for cul-de-sac details, and it lays out the requirements for cul-de-sacs. And this is a fairly new standard in respect to what they used to be for many years. We used to allow different sizes of cul-de-sacs. We allowed different configurations of public turnaround on the end of a public street. all that pretty much went away with the standards that we adopted starting back about 2014. And this is what is currently still in place today, which is a cul-de-sac that has a 40-foot radius, an 80-foot diameter within the curb line. Then it's got 5-foot walks all the way around the outside, so it gets you up to 90 feet of diameter. And then there's this paver block strip behind the sidewalk that's really just kind of that overhang for the bumper of the fire truck when it's going around in the circle. Overall, it works out to about 98 feet in diameter, very large, much larger than what was in the original plat for Christopher's Crossing back in 2000. It's certainly a lot bigger than anything they'd be able to build in that location today. So what the standards did when we made the change in 2014 is the hammerhead options went away in terms of permanent public facilities. And the reason for that was we felt that the cul-de-sac was a better option. It provided better access to all the properties, gave better lot frontage on the properties, better for snow removal, those kind of things, general fire turnaround. But there are occasions when the hammerhead does fit the topography and the site configuration better. And this is probably a good example of that. And so the request that's being made is to allow a permanent public turnaround that is consistent essentially with our temporary turnarounds that are in our current standards. And that's what these three represent. The temporary turnarounds are typically placed at the end of a paved roadway, so the kind of the darker gray here, where, say, you're at the end of a subdivision, and we anticipate that road will be extended in the future, and so for the meantime, it may be a year, that may be 10 years, you end up with some kind of a temporary turnaround for the public, the fire trucks, the garbage truck, everybody else, to be able to make the U-turn and head back the way they came on the public street. Otherwise, you just end up with this little stubby dead end, kind of like we have at the end of Landy right now, and there's nowhere to turn around except in somebody's driveway. And so the temporary turnarounds are still in the standards with all these different configurations for that reason. The one that essentially we're trying to meet here, the applicant is trying to meet, is this one shown here on the right. And just zooming in a bit, you can see it has a 20-foot wide lane width. It's a 70-foot deep T, if you will, and 60 foot each way as a minimum to allow a fire truck to make that motion and make the turnaround. Fire truck, bus, garbage truck, whatever it may be. And so the proposal that is before you in the lot division incorporates this style of turnaround. They're actually proposing, instead of 20 feet wide, that it be, I think it's 28 feet, which is the minimum allowed public street width on a dead-end street under the current city standards. That's the only place we allow the 28-foot anymore, is where there's really no opportunity for that street to be extended in the future, and that is the case in this particular situation. So they are proposing, instead of 20, they use the 28, so it meets our minimum street requirement for width, but then also using the hammerhead in lieu of the standard cul-de-sac. So the variance that is before you is a variance from the adopted standard details and construction drawings that require a cul-de-sac, and in lieu of that, allow the use of the hammerhead style turnaround.
You had a question, Gina, on hammerheads.
I think Les answered it.
Okay.
Right on.
Other questions for Les? Pretty straightforward. Brandon?
I think, in Public Works, there was discussion too, asking how the fire department feels about this, and if you would like to just respond to that.
And certainly, the standards as they exist today were all vetted through the fire department when they were adopted back in 2014. So the temporary turnarounds, the cul-de-sacs, the hammerheads, as we're discussing here, all of those went through the fire department at that time, and they were comfortable with those standards. In fact, some of them got bigger, such as the cul-de-sac, as part of that review process by the fire department. So these have met with their concurrence at the time that they were adopted.
Okay, I move to approve the variance request to build a permanent type 3 turnaround per standard construction, drawing number 5. But is it temporary standard construction? Because that's what it said on the side.
Permanent turnaround, meeting the minimum standard for a temporary turnaround, sizing-wise.
Okay, so that's okay in there?
That's-
Okay. Okay, for, drawing 5, yeah.
Okay, Catherine made a motion.
I'll second.
Brandy, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, give it to Brent. Ladies first.
Okay, Catherine made a motion, Brandy seconded that motion to approve the variance request to build a permanent type 3 turnaround per standard construction, drawing 5. I'll start the roll with Brandy.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
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 Okay, now, we will go on to number C, which will be a public hearing. So Les, you're doing that one as well.
I am. Take
Okay,
number
C.
3 on right-of-way vacations today. Okay, so Bill has done a good job laying out for you what the lot configurations are. I had not personally seen his presentation, so I wasn't quite sure what all he was going to show you, so you'll see a little bit of overlap here. But essentially, you know the location. We're at the north end of Landy Lane. The area that's being requested for vacation is what's shown here in the yellow hatched area. And as you recall, Bill's presentation, there's that little remnant parcel off to the east. This is all existing right-of-way through here today. And then those other 3 lots, as they were done in 2007, are there to the west. Again, just kind of taking you back to a little bit of the origins, just a little bit different graphics here just to help everybody understand exactly how we got to where we are and what is being requested, because we want to make sure it's very clear. So this represents the original 2 lots, kind of outlined in the cyan blue color. The yellow was the cul-de-sac as it was dedicated originally with Christopher's Crossing subdivision. And then in the concept, of course, is to go to this 4-lot configuration with this new shape of public right-of-way. So how we get there is a couple of steps. So we go back to where we started back in 2000 with the original cul-de-sac. And then in 2007, when we went to the 3-lot configuration, we vacated this westerly slice, right, in order to make ground for those 3 lots, but then obtained, or through dedication, received this additional space for right-of-way. So that is the configuration of right-of-way that we have right now. So lots off to the west, the 3 lots, and that remnant there to the east. The current proposal that is before you is to vacate that area in green, and then to, as a requirement of the lot division that you just passed, to dedicate that additional right-of-way, in that kind of yellowish brown there, to then give us ultimately this shape, which is the northerly 2 legs of the hammerhead, the southerly leg, of course, being the existing right-of-way. So the hammerhead motion being right in there. So what is before you, and then it takes us to this configuration with the purple lot lines, which is what Bill showed you, and you've approved now with the lot division, working with this hammerhead style turnaround that you just approved in the variance, and the new dedication that would give us this shape of right-of-way. So that's the quick and easy. And again, the request at this point is for vacation of this area in green of the existing right-of-way, and the combination of the gray and the green is the current existing right-of-way, but the green would be the area being requested for vacation by the applicant.
Catherine?
So we go back to your pink lined one?
The last one?
Yeah.
That one.
So I know that the easement in there for the 15 feet for the sidewalks in there, but it looks like that, so just help me understand it. It looks like there's a sidewalk and then there's a little vertical piece.
Okay, we'll go on to part 2.
Okay, thank you.
I wasn't going to talk about, but I figured somebody might ask the question.
Okay.
So as Bill talked about, the original plat included a sidewalk easement that came down through here. The current sidewalk exists to this point right here, and then there was easement dedicated down to the cul-de-sac to the public right-of-way. So that combination gave a route from Landy Lane all the way through to Hershey. Then with the change that occurred in 2007, we got rid of some of that, and so now here's the new right-of-way. This was all going to be lot development, so what happens to that route? What they did is they granted us that easement right there to make the connection from the existing system into the new right-of-way. So that became the corridor then, coming from the north, across that easement and down through there. Today, again, we're looking at vacation here, dedication here, and ultimately that gives us this configuration. So that, as you were just asking, that vacation is in this kind of diagonal hatch here, and that extends to this line. But what is being required as part of the lot division is that they give us a dedication in those green dash lines, a little hard to see, but that's 15 feet wide. And the reason that there's an overlap here is essentially that they were working with that proposed property line and then going 15 feet east of that. That happened to overlap a little bit of the vacation that's being considered this evening.
Okay.
Other
You wanna see
questions
that
for Les before I open the public hearing?
Thank you. Knew you had anticipated it.
Can you go back to showing all 4 lots, like the whole
Oh,
picture?
the,
for a moment?
This one or the entire
The
subdivision?
entire thing.
That one.
Is there, so I see where you're talking about the sidewalk up there. Is there any sidewalk in front of these 2 southerly lots, the little pieces there? Yeah.
In here?
I mean, what happens at the end of that hammerhead? Is it
Right,
just
there-
the driveway?
There would be sidewalk coming through, and it would come down and come along the westerly side of this north leg of the hammerhead, and then on through, crossing a street, in essence, to the south. I don't believe there's any proposal at this point to bring sidewalk all the way around,
Oh, that's
versus
a
just
teeny-
crossing over and then continuing on.
That's a small flagpole, and this is just a little bit deeper flagpole.
Most likely, this will end up being a shared driveway out through here, as their access to the public right-of-way, and then jumping onto the sidewalk system running north-south through here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you, Les. We may ask you some questions. I am going to open the public hearing at 8:16. I'd like to hear from the applicant, please. And as all public hearings, what we push your name, address.
Good evening, Your Honor, Council. I'm Scott Becker with Hodge & Associates, 405 South Washington, and I'm representing the applicant, who's also here. But I just want to thank staff for the excellent job they've done. There's really, they laid it out very well. I don't want to muddy the water, but I'll certainly answer any questions that you might have, as long as my voice holds out.
Questions for Scott? I think we're good right now. If we have something come up, Scott, we'll bring it back up. I would like to hear from other folks who would like to testify before us.
I need to make sure that I disclose this at Public Works and Finance, that I live on Highland.
Okay. Any other folks want to testify on this? Going once, twice, seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing at 8:17 and turn it over, and Catherine made you live real close to there, so is that a conflict of interest for you or something, Catherine? Is that why you're?
No, I just was, because I live on Highland and that comes out to Highland, I'm on that circle. I was told that I should make sure I clarify that.
Okay. Good enough. See any issue with that, Gary?
No, sir, as long as there's no financial interest, there should be no conflict.
You're not getting gain on this? Okay. I'll turn over to council here, so.
I would just say I'm very impressed with the persistence and creativity in trying to make this work better. So anyways.
Brandy, I didn't have a gray hair in my head the first time I heard this thing. And I looked actually pretty good back then. That's how long this thing's been kicking around, so just saying. Okay.
All right, well, I'm just trying to pull it up. Somebody else want to make the motion?
Go ahead if you want to.
Okay, I move that we accept, I don't have it in writing. This is going to be approve the vacation request for adoption of the draft ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that the ordinance be read by title and published by summary. Thank you.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Jim to approve the vacation request by adoption of the draft ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and that the ordinance be read by title and published by summary. All good, we'll start with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, there you go, thank God, and I hope you can do something, Mr. Gold, with that thing, because that's been kicking around for a couple of decades, so good luck to you on it. Okay, I gotta read the ordinance 2018-3. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the vacation of a portion of public street right-of-way located within the City of Moscow and legally described in Section 1 of this ordinance, providing that the title to be said vacated public right-of-way shall vest with the title to be vacated public right-of-way shall be vest with the owners of the property as specified in Section 3 of this ordinance, and providing that this ordinance shall be in full force and effect from and after the passage approved on publication according to law. Okay, with that, we are going to move on to something different. Sanitation Systems Planning Service. Tim Davis. Mr. Davis, you have the podium, sir.
Good evening. Before you this evening for your consideration is an agreement for development of a comprehensive sanitation system master plan with Great West Engineering of Boise, Idaho. Some of the key elements of the plan will include a recycling program and facility evaluation, development of recycling center layout concept, including concept level cost estimates, solid waste program review and assessment, and a local material recovery facility feasibility analysis. During this process, the city will engage in an advisory group consisting of members of the Sustainable Environment Commission, community members, and technicians to assist with the master planning effort. Data and opinion gathering will include a written community survey, multiple focus group interviews, as well as intercept surveys at the recycling center, public drop-off locations, and users. Staff has negotiated the attached agreement with Great West Engineering for sanitation system planning services in the amount of $63,641. Funding is proposed from sanitation professional services in the amount of $35,000, with the remaining amount of solid waste development. This planning project is expected to be completed by September of 2018. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Tim?
Tim, given that we don't really know where the recycling center will potentially move to, would this agreement cover them dealing with that situation when we identify a site?
What they're trying to do for us is they'll put together somewhat of a conceptual design and a footprint, and from there, the city will take that over, and then we'll know what size of property and footprint it's going to take to build the new one, and somewhat of a conceptual design and layout, that type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I like the order of things here. I like that we are doing a survey. I like that there's a lot of public input in this process. And then we work that into what is going to be developed. I really appreciate that. I think this is a very important thing that we need to be doing.
Okay. Catherine or Ann, any
No questions?
comments, anything you got?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, go
I'm
right
excited
ahead.
about this one.
All right.
Your Honor, I move that we approve the sanitation system planning services agreement with Great West Engineering Incorporated.
Second.
Was that you, Ann?
It
A second?
was.
Okay. Got a motion by Gina and a second by Ann to approve the sanitation systems planning service agreement with Great West Engineering. I will start the roll with, I can't remember, I'll go with Brandy.
Aye.
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 Okay. Well, thank you, Tim, very much. Item number 10, request from Hamilton Funds for the purchase and installation of wheelchair swing in East City Park. Dwight Curtis, and we've got some young ladies that have been enduring our council meeting all evening. Dwight,
Sleepy.
which we appreciate.
I think we should let their government teacher know that they get extra credit for
Get
waiting all
activity
this
points.
long.
Sure, exactly.
Activity
Tell
points.
either him or Sam, because they're next door neighbors on the third floor up there, call the mayor if they got any issue with that. I agree with that. So we'll go with Dwight.
All right, well, thank you, and I'd like to start this off with a quick little video should take no less than, or no more anyway, than 30 minutes or so. I mean, seconds.
Now, Dwight, I bet these young ladies could tell us this whole story in about 4 or 5 minutes, so.
Yeah.
Park
You'll
holds
enjoy
a
this.
special place in the hearts of many children, but if you have special needs, participating in the fun isn't always possible. News 19's Lana Harris takes us to one park in the Midlands that's trying to change that.
Through the eyes of a child, the playground can be magical. Climb up the stairs and you're the captain of a pirate ship, an explorer squeezing through small spaces, or on the swings, feeling like you can fly. Hey, Mama. But not through Itzel Mess's eyes. All she can do is watch.
She has her hand over her face, she has her head down.
And that's hard for her mother, Nicole Rivera, to see.
Definitely.
It's families like this that gave Newberry's Parks and Rec director Scott Sawyer a vision.
We can offer something to them that they can have fun.
A vision that would let Nicole kick off her daughter's brakes.
Here we go, E.T.
And go to a swing set just for her. And that was a sight to see.
E.T., you're excited? You're excited, Mommy?
Thanks to money from a state grant, these wheelchair-accessible swings at Marion Davis Park were shipped all the way from Scotland.
This is something that many of them may never have been able to do before.
Yay, E.T.
And it's her siblings' turn to watch her.
Do you like it?
It fills this mom with a feeling hard to explain.
There's no better feeling especially for parents, to see that smile on her face, and I'm speechless. I really can't. It's hard.
And that's magic. Lana Harris, News 19, WLTX.
Well, Sawyer says there are instructions for the wheelchair swing at the park, and that parents who want to use it can contact the city of Newberry for an access key.
Okay, little Olympics here. No idea where that came from.
I watched curling for a couple of hours, Dwight, so we don't need to go there.
Somebody was busted for doping
I
curling.
saw that. Is
Doping.
that necessary? Come on.
It's the sweepers.
That's
It's
embarrassing.
gotta be the sweepers.
All right, there we go. Okay, well, as you saw with that video, I mean, you can't help but think about that just a little bit. I mean, Moscow has no wheelchair accessible swings, and you think about the people that are in wheelchairs that could have been participating at our playgrounds at that level for all these years, and just haven't been. And so sort of a forgotten crowd, you might say. And you know, I have my own issues with the way that the federal guidelines are with accessibility definitions for playgrounds, and this one makes me feel better because it takes care of some of those concerns. So on with my presentation. Back in January via the Moscow Buddy Club, and we had Lena Werner. She is the president of that club, and her advisor, Corey Voss, and this is Anna Bales. She's one of the student associates. And anyway, they requested through one of our council members that that they have a swing put in out at East City Park. And so just going through the whole sequence of things, we finally ended up here today. And so I wanted to show you what we've got, and of course they're here to answer any technical questions about why they wanted to put this on. And the Buddy Club, it's a club run by the high school, run by the students, and they take care of issues of people that have challenges, and it doesn't have to be handicapped, but just challenges. And so they're the buddies, and what they wanted to do, as you saw in your packet, they wanted to raise some funds toward this swing set. And so originally, and talking to several people around the country, on the pictures you see up on the screen, the one on the bottom center is typically where communities go. And I can tell you from my own experience that they don't last very long. If you remember back in the days how many people you could stuff into a phone booth or a VW Bug, well, that's what happens to these, and they break. And so I would give it maybe a week before we would no longer have a swing set. So we started to look for something more durable, and the upper right is what we came up with. It's not a local piece of equipment, but there are none developed here or produced here in the United States that are like that. They're either this cheap brand or the direction that most communities go are swing seats that are meant for accessibility, but that requires somebody to be able to get out of their wheelchair or be picked up out of their wheelchair and put into those swings. And they don't, one size does not fit all with those either. So there are a lot of issues with those. So hopefully our country will, manufacturers will change that and go this direction. Here's another view. You can see those seat type swings. And they do have a place, and we'll likely purchase some of those to add to the other playgrounds around town, so we do have other accessible playgrounds. Just this would, at least at this point, would be our only swing that would be here, wheelchair accessible. Like I said earlier, we have no swings. I know of none, private or public, in the city of Moscow that are wheelchair accessible. ADA is a heavy focus in our Parks and Rec master plan. It's also going to be one of our primary focuses of the update that we're working on now. This sort of got ahead of us, but we evaluated the request. We saw that it didn't interfere with the direction that we were going. We would have gotten to this point anyway. So, I mean, why not? This swing is needed. The cost, and it's spendy, it's about $34,000, and that includes the safety tiles. It's not just the swing. You have to enclose this. It is planned to be at East City Park, and this is an unsupervised location, so it requires a little fenced-in area, and that's not to keep people out, as in trespassing type thing. It's meant for safety, so you're not a pedestrian walking in front of the swing, and you saw the size of it, and that's metal, that you would get hurt. It's not in this budget, the fiscal year 18 budget, but it does meet the council's resolution of 2017-07, authorizing the use of the Hamilton funds that were set aside specifically for playground purchasing and installation. This would require opening the budget in, I think, August, and authorizing those funds. I don't know the technical words there, but anyway, that brings it into this year's budget at that time. And we would purchase this right away so that we could put it in as soon as weather and schedules permit this summer. And with this, the Buddy Club, their estimation up front was that they would likely be able to raise about $3,000 toward this, and we would use the Hamilton funds to fund the remainder of that. And with that, let's see if I've got any more here. Another picture of that. Here's another picture of it. Mainly I was looking at the ocean part, but I thought it was a great, scene.
Okay.
And this was another a variety that you could use, but it takes two people to work it, and it's not user friendly, and it is a little more on the cheap, undurable side. And there's that guy again. Like I mentioned before, about $34,000 will take care of this. And I believe, there we go. Staff recommendation is to approval of purchase and installation cost of the wheelchair accessible ice swing in East City Park using an estimated $3,000 in funds donation from the Moscow High School Buddy Club and the remaining funds from the Hamilton Fund for a total of about $34,000. And that's all that I have. They are here to answer questions.
Well, we're going to, Dwight, if you'd please sit down for a minute, because I want to bring these two young ladies who have been enduring us all evening. You can come back to Dwight in a minute, okay? I want Miss Horner and Miss Bales to come up, and their advisor can as well. But these two young ladies, I'm going to share something with you, ladies and gentlemen. I get a chance to see these young women from time to time because I'm one of the other hats that I wear. I'm the chair of Stepping Stones Foundation here in Moscow and have been for 2 years. And these young women have brought presentations in front of us. And I have been so proud of these kids over these last several years that I've been associated with Stepping Stones. So please, tell us what's on your mind and tell us a little bit about the Buddy Club.
Well, just to clarify, we're co-presidents also. So basically, the Buddy Club is a club at the Moscow High School that works to promote inclusion and create events that really, make students with disabilities feel really at home at our school and really adds to a really inclusive and accepting environment at our school. We put on events like cookie decorating, like holiday events, and then our upcoming event in March is Spread the Word to End the Word Day, which is basically a national day that is dedicated to stopping the use of the R word. So we put on various events throughout the year, and we really think that this swing, though it's not technically a school event or anything, would really add to the inclusive and accepting environment of Moscow as a whole. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's have Lena. How about you? You want to share the other young lady? You want to share with us what is
Yeah,
more?
so a really cool thing that happened to Buddy Club 2 years ago.
I think about two.
What was it from?
Creme 2 Care for Kids.
So we won this grant from Creme 2 Care for Kids for, how much was it?
$5,000.
For $5,000. It was really cool and really exciting, and with that money, we have been looking for a way to give back to not only our school, but to our community. And when they stumbled upon this idea, it seemed like a fantastic way for Buddy Club to use the funds that we have.
Some.
Some
We've
of
already
them.
used some of them.
Yeah, we have used some of them, but to use some of those funds to go back to giving to the community.
And we wanted to do East City Park because it's a really central park, and it's really loved by a lot of Moscow, obviously, and it's really close to the school. And we use that when it starts getting warmer. We take some of the students up there during class periods, and so it would be a really great location for it.
Very, very nice. How about your advisor? Should we hear something from your advisor? You got to be incredibly proud of these kids.
I am. These girls are wonderful. I think, kind of adding to Lena and what part of the reason we didn't want the bench type for lifting, where you have to lift somebody, is one, we don't do more than, we always have a two-person lift. I never ask the students to lift, and oftentimes it's the students that go up with another student to the park. And then also with the bench ones, if you've ever been around somebody in a wheelchair, the wheelchair is actually an extension of their body. So we're asking, if we taking them out of their extension, part of their body to put them in a swing, they're typically not nearly as comfortable. And so that's why, a lot of people asked us, well, why not just that? And that was the reason, is because we want them to be able to stay in their wheelchair and be able to be with their friends, and their friends can put them in the swing, and we don't have to, the adults, that's one of the big things with Buddy Club that I've always pushed is, they get to play with or hang out with their same age peers, and us adults are very boring, and I get that. And I want them to be able to have time to hang out with their friends, and we can step back as far as we can and still make sure there's, safety in there. But these two girls have been great about making sure that happens. I'm going to miss both of them next year, actually. But so, yeah, that was kind of the reason we wanted to make sure that it happened.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Now, you had a question for Dwight, or is it?
Yeah, and I just wanted your letter that you wrote, Lena. Your Lena, sorry, I'm sorry. I missed that in the piece, I'm sorry. Anyway, the letter that you wrote that's in our packet says everything that you all said, but I just thought it was exceptionally clear that you were very interested in contributing to the community, and I think you're going to inspire some other actions, and I think that's going to be really good. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you.
I have a question for Dwight.
Okay,
Yeah,
Brandy's got a question for Dwight.
As do I.
Okay.
Who will do the installation?
We will do that in-house.
Okay.
And as I also said in the packet, we have quite a team of folks that, they're certified installers. We've had practice now. This is a whole lot smaller, but we saved the city a considerable amount of money. Just Indian Hills alone, we saved the city in staff costs or labor costs about $14,000. So it works, and we have quality control and schedule control, everything. So it's working out really well. This is just as far as construction anyway, another playground, and Dave in the back there, I mean, they've got it under control, so it should be a nice project.
Yes,
Go ahead.
So Dwight,
I'll come back to you, Jim.
at Parks and Rec, originally you all had talked about a section of the park. Could you go into just a little bit more information about, so people could understand where the ice swing will be?
It will be really close to the bigger kids' swing set, or not swing set, but the playground that's there now, and it would be on the swing set side. And it'll be facing the bigger kids' swing as well. And that was by request, and so that they'll feel as they're part of the peers that are out there.
Jim, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question for Dwight. As I look at the design on this, it looks really sturdy, and I was wondering if you'd talk to the welding shops in town, if they, I mean, it's obviously can easily be constructed by somebody in Moscow. Have you talked to anybody about that?
About fabricating
building
one?
that, showing them that picture and say, could you build this for?
We have not gone down that road. No, have not. I don't know that
You wouldn't even consider that?
Well, I mean, they need something to go off of to begin with. I don't know. I don't know if this particular one involves liability issues once you go off of things that are already approved by the national safety standards. I don't know those answers. I suppose they can build anything, but doing it the right way and but no, we have not approached that. We haven't done that with the playgrounds either,
Right.
which would be the same thing.
Okay.
Okay, so
I would like to make the motion to approve the purchase and installation of the wheelchair accessible ice swing in East City Park using an estimated $3,000 funds donation from the Moscow High School Buddy Club and the remaining funds from the Hamilton Fund for a total of $34,000.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Brandy, a second by Gina to approve the purchase and installation of the wheelchair accessible swing at East City Park using an estimated $3,000 funds donation from the Moscow High School Buddy Club and the remaining funds from the Hamilton Fund for a total of $34,000. I'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 All
Aye.
There we go, kids. Thank you very much. I'm so very, very proud of you. Keep up the good work, kids. Go Bears, huh? Okay, item number 11, general, oh, by the way, thank you for enduring us the last couple of hours. General obligation bond discussion request for direction from Gary Reedner. Gary, you have the podium, sir.
Yeah, great business opportunity.
Okay. Thank you. What we're here to talk about tonight is the city facilities bond discussion. As on November 20th, you recall, we were before you, staff was before you, talking about where we were at as far as the council's direction to proceed with a general obligation bond to address some of the city's excuse me, major challenge areas, specifically the police station, which was determined to be substandard and its configuration not safe, so on and so forth, as well as some of the other cities' other space needs. Because we have some new council members who weren't here on November 20th, we'll talk a little bit about a little bit of the history so that we can see where we've gone from here. So in 2015, we engaged in a facilities master plan, looking at what the city's needs were going to be over the next 20 years. At that time, the plan addressed 4 of the most critical facilities needs at the time. Number 1 was the construction of a new police station, estimated to be about $4.8 million. Phase 2 expansion of the city shop and associated workspace, office spaces, an estimate around $10.7 million on the high side. Construct new city office building to replace the man building, which we know is undersized, but we felt was at the end of its serviceable life because of some of the exterior cracking in the building. And phase 4, remodel the city hall basement, estimated $710,000 at that time. So again, through the facility study, the main issue that was pointed out was the police services facility or police station. And those are the three biggest issues: inadequate space, inefficient configuration, and limited access for emergency response. As you know, it is located on a one-way street and a cul-de-sac street. The only way to leave the police station in a southern, if you had to respond south, would be to go down the alley between Main Street and Washington Street, or across Washington Street till you hit Jefferson, and then move over southward onto 6th Street. The overcrowding and inadequate space in two other buildings or two other facilities were also pointed out. One was community development, which, as you can see, was 50% or 54% deficient within a matter of 5 years. Engineering, 66% deficient in a matter of 5 years. And then information systems, which was going to be deficient on just under 1,000 square feet, would be 50% deficient within another 5 years. So those were other office needs that currently were either being housed in the man building or eventually had to be taken, in the case of information systems, out of City Hall and moved to the Egan Youth Center because we did not have any downtown office space for that facility. So the facilities master plan was something that we looked at in developing the city's strategic plan in 2016. We looked at, council looked at a lot of different challenges facing the community, and those major challenge areas, one of the biggest ones, the tier 1 for internal major challenge areas, was in fact the police station, and you can see those same qualifications were put in the city's strategic plan as well. Council made that again a tier 1 internal challenge area. In that same thing, and I'm not going to ask you to read this, but the recycling center was also the subject of the strategic planning effort, and suffice it to say that the recycling center operations, as they were determined in 1993, when the current recycling center was constructed, you've seen a huge increase in tonnages received at the recycling center, as you can see, from 1993 to 1995, and to 2013, there was an increase of about 1,200 tons, about 50% during that period of time. So if you go to the italicized center, with growing recycling material tonnages, community participation, and the implementation of single-stream curbside recycling, overall recycling tonnage will far outstrip the recycling center's ability to meet the city's future requirements without an entirely new design, location, or recycling approach. So there were several strategies that were put forward to the council to consider. One was to increase the capacity and capability of the recycling program and the facilities. And second was to address some of the safety concerns at the recycling center, namely the interface between some of the equipment that was used to empty the bins at the recycling center, and hopefully to make it more usable. Some of the strategies were to look at expansion on the recycling center proposal from 2003, which is when the city purchased additional property to the south of the recycling center, some of which was used for the C Street right-of-way, to expand the footprint and make the recycling center more usable, in other words, spread the operation out, or to procure a new recycling center site and a new facility design that better meets the city's needs into the future beginning in June 2015. As an adjunct to that, the city was in the process of implementing a single-stream recycling program to replace the old curbside recycling program, and that also impacted the operations of the current center. So, as a bit of the background, in 2015, the City Council directed us to explore a $10 million general obligation bond issue to address those 5 or 6 issues bulleted. The first was a new police facility. At that time was estimated to be about $5.5 million. Replace fire equipment, estimated to be about $2 million at the time. Some park development, about $1 million. That was not to develop all of the undeveloped parks in town, but to address some of the issues. Downtown infrastructure, as you know, the Main Street downtown, what used to be called the downtown LID. The crosswalks are in poor shape, the aggregate crosswalks. So the council said, or asked us to look into addressing that issue. That was estimated $500,000 to do just a bare minimum intersection replacement. Street repair and maintenance was huge at the time. Council wanted to address that as well, so there was $1 million that was allocated, or at least proposed to be put towards street repair and maintenance. And the city shop was also determined that council wanted us to address that. We'll look at those separately very quickly. Okay, first of all of these different technical advisory committees were formed to address each of these issues. So we had what we referred to as subject matter experts. The police met with designers to look at the police issues. Fire department personnel looked at the fire issues, the apparatus, parks, streets, and on down the line. Then there were a few, the Finance, Technical Advisory Committee, and Public Relations Communication, to address how technically we could pursue this. So, going back, I'm going to backtrack one slide. The police services facility is one that is still viable and will be addressed tonight. Fire equipment replacement, as you will recall, council directed that we address those issues in the budget, so we reallocated funding, brought a proposal to the city council 2 years ago to fund fire apparatus in the budget by accumulating monies in a very aggressive accumulation. We've done that. There is one fire truck on order. It should be here in April or early May. We have just reported the other day that we are a finalist for a community development block grant in the amount of $300,000 to purchase another fire engine within the next 12 months as well. The going rate for fire engines is somewhere around $540,000, so that would be a big boost to us as well. But should we receive the CDBG grant or not, we will proceed on schedule to purchase that apparatus every 2 years until the current apparatus is replaced, except for the ladder truck, which will be replaced in 2026, or at least is scheduled at that time. Park development, council passed a resolution that Dwight referred to earlier tonight, looking at the remaining balance of the Hamilton Trust Fund and allocate that. Council determined that those funds, about $1.9 million is remaining in the fund, will be utilized for the purchase of playground equipment and accessible pathways for incremental development of the city parks. In addition, the Parks Department has put together a pretty innovative plan to do the landscaping in the parks, the rough landscaping themselves, and as Dwight indicated, they've trained personnel in order to install playgrounds to make it even more economical. Downtown infrastructure, as I indicated, $500,000 would not have replaced all the downtown infrastructure. We are currently working with the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency. The Urban Renewal Agency commissioners are considering extending Legacy Crossing Urban Renewal District, which now ends at the alley to the west of Main Street, taking in the Jackson Street parking lot and going west from there. Consideration is being considered at this point to extend Legacy Crossing to the west, or excuse me, the east right-of-way sidewalk of Main Street, which would allow the URA to also become a partner with the city in redeveloping that infrastructure. Street repair and maintenance is being addressed by a couple of fortuitous circumstances. One is direction from the City Council to look for additional funding. We have done so. We've reallocated funding. We've gone from about $250,000 to $300,000 of annual street maintenance funding, which we accumulate every 2 years and do a maintenance project. That funding now, last year I believe, was around $780,000. This year is over $800,000 to address our pavement maintenance plan. So we have essentially doubled and then some of the allocation towards streets. So again, as part of the strategic planning process and the way that we're budgeting at this point, we're able to reallocate. Now, that does not mean that we have money coming out of our ears. It's just council directed through the strategic planning process, and we're able to address these other issues. The city shop, on the other hand, turned out to be the first estimate of what it would cost to replace the city shop was a significant amount of money, upwards of $20 million. That was too big of a bite to try and fund internally, and it is something that, as we're looking for different alternatives, we just need additional time to work that out. So staff is working on some different alternatives and proposals for addressing the city shop. The city shop is still a high priority and needs to be addressed, and that will be the next thing that we work on after this bond issue we're talking about tonight. So, going into the recycling center, how does that tie into the police services facility assessment? This is what we talked about a year and a half ago, and again on November 20th. So, the city commissioned a study to explore the possibility of constructing a new police station at the current recycling center location. If you recall, we did a search for land that was available in a central Moscow location for replacement of the police station. We looked as far north as Highway 95 by Moscow Building Supply. We looked as far south as Palouse River Drive, as far east as Blaine Street, and as far west as Line Street. The only lot that filled the needs of accessibility and availability was the recycling center site on Jackson Street. It happened to dovetail with the strategic planning concept for the recycling center, that the operations that we're moving through, the changes that the recycling center was going through, made the site of the current recycling center not optimal for continued recycling activities, and we'll address that. And you had Tim tonight, Tim Davis, proposed and council approved moving forward with the study to obtain additional information from the community as to what services the recycling center supplies and would work in a new recycling center. And once those services are determined, then one could be sized and property could be obtained in order to provide those services. So again, the current recycling center site, not well suited for the single stream recycling system. We've seen an increase of about 133% in recycling volumes, and there's inadequate processing and storage capacity at that center at this point. Most of the most of the single stream recycling now is taken to the recycling center where it was dropped off. It's brought in a Packer recycling type truck, dropped off, and it is baled as a single stream, placed on a truck and taken to Tacoma, where it is taken to a materials recovery facility. The bales are cut, the recycling is separated and processed over there. So a lot of the operation at the current recycling center is not drop-off, it is baling. Secondly, the yard waste drop-off is not configured very well. We, from the original drop-off, about 10 years into it, about 2002, 2003, we reconfigured the drop-off into the Z-block formation that you see behind there now. So we've increased the capacity somewhat. It is no longer able to increase the capacity even more. Additionally, it's placed at the top of the vertical curve of Almond Street, which is to say that people are backing trailers in off of Almond Street as traffic which may not see the people backing up is proceeding both north and south on Almond Street. We've been very lucky in that area. People know it's dangerous and they tend to slow down during those seasons, but there are safety concerns. So again, Tim identified the master plan that we're proceeding with at this point. In that period of time, you will recall that after we had reported to council that the optimal site seemed to be the recycling center site, we also looked at The federal building, which is currently owned by Gritman Medical Center, we worked with Gritman for approximately a year to try and determine whether that property would be available, what it would cost to adapt it to the reuse as a police station, as well as to house other city facilities. Ultimately, it proved to be too expensive, and we could not proceed with that. So we came back to the council in November requesting further directions. So we looked back at the last proposal that we put together, and that was the recycling center. What you see before you is the current recycling center. That is Hungadunga Brewery off to the right, which is to the north. The south is C Street between St. John Hardware and the current recycling center. If you look at the wall that is between the current building and the C Street right-of-way, right here, everything to the south of that was purchased about, I want to say about 2000 from, it was the Helbling Land Company, its former Burlington Northern right-of-way. After it was purchased, there was an expansion of the recycling center to take the drop-offs and move them over here so that your forklifts would be moving back in this direction, that the public would come in from here and out, that sort of thing. However, that did not address the yard waste drop-off issues. So, and during that same period of time, council determined that they wanted C Street to go through. C Street is a substandard street. There's no parking allowed on C Street. It is merely connector between Jackson and Almond, thank you. Okay, so should a police services facility be constructed on that site? This is the basic configuration. This is the main area. This is the public parking lot, secured parking lot, and a storage facility. Got some additional floor plans. You can't see them from here. If you'd like to see them in more detail, certainly able to provide those. This was done in conjunction with the Technical Advisory Committee, which comprised of city staff, including a large contingent of the police department, as well as in conjunction with LCA Architects out of Boise, firm that does these sort of buildings. So that was the first floor you saw there. This is the second floor. And then on to some elevations. This is looking in a westerly direction off of Jackson Street. This is an elevation looking to the northwest. I believe that was the northwest. Another elevation. So that's, again, this is all conceptual design. It has not been designed for construction at this point. That is something that will be done should we be successful with our bond election. So as part of that, obviously moving the police department out of the 4th Street location would leave that building available for repurposing or sale. At the beginning of this process, we looked at it and we were on the fence about it. We thought perhaps it could be resold and perhaps offset part of the bond issue or cost of the construction of the new police station. Looked at that and looked at the existing city facilities. The Gritman Medical Center purchase, or our proposed purchase of the federal building, would have allowed us, it was a large enough facility, it would have allowed us to house other city operations there, namely community development, engineering, as well as the information systems department. So we would have taken care of all of our space needs for the next 20 some odd years at least. When that went off the table, we had the police station we were still working on that looked like it was going to need to be addressed with a single purpose police station. And then secondly, we had the issues of the engineering department, information systems department, and community development currently housed in substandard, I guess, inadequate space, both in the Mann Building at the Egan Youth Center. So we looked, and was there a way that we could address those issues as well? So we worked with Associated Architects to take a look and see if it would be possible to reconfigure the 4th Street current police station to house some of the necessary city functions. So They did, and it was determined that community development and engineering could be relocated to that site. The parking is not as optimal as we would like it to be, but it is adequate for those purposes. And it is an existing city facility that is very economical to repurpose. If you look, we were looking at the facilities master plan, as I indicated before. The estimate of constructing a new office building to house these facilities would be $3.6 million. So we were looking at, is it possible to have a cascading effect, if you will, move engineering and community development to the 4th Street facility, leaving the man building empty and allow it to be repurposed for some other facilities, namely information systems and maybe some other operations. We were able to find out that the man building was not structurally unsound. We had a structural engineering firm take a look at it. They determined that the cracking in the building was superficial, so it could be reconfigured on the interior at a fairly reasonable cost, and the exterior could be resurfaced in order to serve the city's needs for years to come. So this is just going through the same thing that I just talked about. I should have skipped ahead of a slide. This is the conceptual design by Associated Architects. This is Jackson Street. This is 4th Street. So you have engineering on this side of the building. This is the corner, which you see police station out here, and the flagpole is here. This is where the old entrance to the facility was. Back when it was J&J Glass years and years ago before the city obtained it. Right now, there are issues with the only ADA access is back along Jackson Street here. If you want to gain ADA access to the police station now, you need to go through this secondary entrance here. The 4th Street entrance is up steps. There is the lobby entrance, and then there is the police officer entrance. So we could be reconfigured in this way, allow ADA access, and be reconfigured inside to meet the needs of engineering and community development. So what is the cost of these projects? As you recall, the initial proposal was a $10 million bond issue. We've updated the numbers. You saw on the first discussion in 2015 was about $5.5 million for a police services facility. That is inflated. As you know from city projects, we've seen an increase over the last year to 2 years, increases of 15 to 25, 30% because of the market. So we've re-estimated that at just shy of $7 million for a new police facility. 4th Street renovation would be about $1.4 million. That would renovate it for use by engineering and community development. The man building, fortunately, is the cheapest part of this because it is structurally sound, and the interior would be used for offices, which it is used for today, and also some additional record storage for City Hall. It can be renovated fairly cheaply, so the proposed bond issue as proposed would be about $8.5 million. So, as the mayor indicated in a press release last week, council had authorized us to move ahead in the fiscal year 2018 budget to again move forward with the bond issue addressing those facilities' needs. In that period of time, the reason for the first delay from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 18 was because of the potential for working with Gritman on the federal building. That fell through, so we fell back, worked on the original proposal. As we worked toward the recycling center site, it became apparent that we weren't going to be able to complete the recycling center and sanitation master plan, strategic plan, in the period of time prior to a bond election. And it was felt and recommended that with the 66 2/3% that is necessary for a general obligation bond passage, that any questions regarding the recycling center had best be addressed prior to moving ahead. So the proposal that we are recommending, and we will get there in just a moment with a schedule, we're recommending that council again ask or direct us to proceed in the FY 2019 budget while we are proposing to move forward with the sanitation strategic plan. So the new proposed project timeline, May 19 would be the bond election, and then you can see, as I said, the cascading projects moving down from there. Police services design in 2019, bid in spring of 2020, construction about a year from spring 2020 to spring 2021. Occupancy in the summer of 2021. We would be working on the 4th Street renovation prior to the police moving into the new facility, and then 4th Street renovation, occupancy, man building after that. So in the summer of 2022, should this be approved and we're able to move forward, we should have the complete renovation and reoccupancy, repurposing, construction of a new police station completed. So our recommendation at this time is that staff direct us to, in the FY 2019 budget, hold a May 2019 GO bond measure in the approximate amount of $8.5 million. In the meantime, we will complete the sanitation assessment and master planning process, including public outreach, so that we can not only determine what services the community wants out of their recycling center, but also determine an optimal way to deliver those services. Secondly, we will continue to refine the conceptual plans and construction cost estimates, so at the time we're able to develop a budget and proceed with the bond election, we have good, accurate numbers. We believe we have those today, but again, we're talking a year down the road. We will include the appropriations for the bond proposal and the recycling center proposal both in the FY 2019 budget. They will be estimates, and of course the council can direct us up or down from there, and hopefully we'll have recommendations ready to bring to you in the FY 2019 budget, and that we will bring the final proposed facilities package to you for your review and approval in the fall of 2018 in anticipation of that May 2019 general obligation bond election. Now, as an adjunct to that, we will also be bringing you forward the results of the sanitation comprehensive planning, strategic planning concept. So if it is possible to move the recycling center, if a location has been determined at that time, we will bring that forward as well. We also believe that given the additional time, we'll be able to answer more questions that we expect the public will have, not just for the recycling center, but also to look at the needs that the city has. The police station has long been a goal of the city council for, well, as long as I've been here, 26 years. The police station, from the time City Hall moved out of that facility, the police took it over. I believe it was about 1995. It has been inadequate and it's in a poor location. So this is the time to move it forward. We believe that it will give us additional time to outreach to the public and have them come tour the police station, bring that information forward so that the public can be well informed prior to the bond election occurring. Secondly, looking at the space configurations and inadequate space of the man building and some of the other city operations. So it's our recommendation to the council that with this direction, we believe we can put together a good bond election proposal and sanitation strategic plan in time for that bond election in May of 2019.
Thank you, Gary. Questions for Gary? Ann?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Could you go back to the projected timeline, please, Gary?
There you go.
Are there just too many unknowns then to put the recycling center into this at this time?
No. This was having to do with the bond election itself. So these were all bond projects. The recycling center not being a bond project, but yet joined at the hip, is something that we can address in our normal budget process. So that's why we didn't place it up here. In addition, depending upon the information that we glean from the surveys, it may fall anywhere within the front end of this timeline. Obviously, there couldn't be anything happening on the recycling center site until those operations were moved anyway.
It ties in with that sanitation master plan, Ann.
Great.
And as Tim
And we don't
indicated,
have that identified right now.
as Tim
Catherine.
indicated, that should be done by this fall,
We don't
so we
know.
should have that answer by then.
And I have a question for you and Chief Fry about, do you see the force increasing with this? What kind of changes do you see internally with the police department? With the change in the building, or?
I don't necessarily see the force increasing unless there's a huge influx of population. At that point, maybe.
Yeah, if you look at the facilities master plan, the facilities master plan takes into account the probable growth of the city. And so as it goes by population, depending upon that, the growth of the city, so would the estimates of increased staff for not only the police department, but other city departments as well. So it's not anticipated just moving to that facility alone with no change in population or any of the other demographics would require additional staff at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Brandy?
Would the estimated 8.5 million, the wording of that cover the fact that we're talking about a year later and the estimates might be more at that time?
Yes, what we're looking for is direction tonight.
Got it.
As I indicated in the recommendation, we will continue to refine numbers, tighten those up as much as we can. So by the time we request appropriation, that the council will have a pretty hard number to go by. And again, it's just like our public works projects. Give you the best estimate we can, but until we get the bids in, we're not really sure if they're good estimates or not. We've tried to build as much flexibility and some contingencies into these numbers, so we're not surprised.
Could very easily be closer to the 10 million that we
That's what, I mean, and we
originally
can
talked
go,
about,
yep, right,
Brandy.
yep, that's what I was,
We're
I wouldn't
certainly
want to.
hoping not, but we'll have numbers for you.
And I suppose there could be possibilities of unforeseen things that led up to some things originally that were thought would be sought after in the bond that now have been covered in other unforeseen ways. I mean, that's not going to happen with the police station, I don't think, but, you know, between now and then, perhaps we have some nice surprises that could change exactly what the amount that we're seeking in the bond.
Certainly.
I
That'd be
just
good.
want to be sure that flexibility is there, that's all. Yep.
Okay.
Well, I moved to direct staff. Do you have a question? Sorry.
I do have one
Okay,
question. I don't know if you happen to know this, or Tim, is there a question about composting, curbside composting in the survey that's upcoming?
Certainly could be. We are talking about perhaps including some questions about yard clippings, if for lack of a better term, or curbside collection of plant materials. There's some discussion of what that would look like, but certainly we'll try and find out all of those services, what we will put out there for the survey.
One of the things, Ann, we do not know what we're going to do with that right now. And so that's a big thing for people. They can take their grass clippings and their, leaves in the fall and that sort of thing. It's one of the balls that's up in the air right now.
Yeah, if I may too, just so there's no confusion, the sanitation strategic plan is about the entire sanitation system. Recycling is merely one piece of that.
Yep.
So,
It's
but
part
it's
of it.
one that it will be front burnered and it will be the subject of a large part of the public process. Did you have another specific question for
No,
Tim?
that was it. Thank you.
If I,
Go ahead, Ken.
so just so you know, Ann, Tim and I have talked, and composting has come up, and he let me know that he is going to have certain questions on the survey, because I had asked him about all the compost that you can get from Latah Sanitation that's free to get it into town, and he was like, yes, I want to do something with it. So I think they're crafting questions to find out all the possible uses for what our community is interested in doing.
If I may, again, one of the things in the sanitation system that the current composting program that we have out at Latah Sanitation is one that wasn't in effect when we started the franchise in 1993. It was a pilot program. We used to ship our biosolids to Lewiston. We're now working with LSI, cut down on the distance, the time, that sort of thing. So that just shows the flexibility of the sanitation system and how it has progressed over the years.
Well, lots have changed over 25 years.
Yeah, Tim's done a great job with it.
Okay.
All right, I move to direct staff to reschedule the public facilities bond election authorized at the November 20th, 2017 City Council meeting from May 2018 to May 2019.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Catherine and a second by Gina to direct staff to reschedule the public facilities bond election authorized at November 2017 City Council meeting from May of 2018 to May of 2019. Start the roll, Brandy.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
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 Okay, consider it moved.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. We're down to the end of our night, but we'll go to reports. We'll start with you, Gina.
Oh, wow. Okay, I went to the Transportation Commission meeting, and there's a lot of work going on where I had to leave for half of it because it was quasi-judicial. I will tell you that they are working with Smart Transit to basically do another citizen survey. We've got a lot of surveys coming out, and we're going to try and discover through this survey whether or not extended hours are necessary or a whole nother route for Smart Transit is necessary. So it's the beginning of that process, and the Transportation Commission is working with Smart to do that. I also went to the volunteer fire department meeting, and that was quite fun. I learned, and the one big piece of information that I learned in my first half an hour of the meeting is that there are different hat colors denoting different ranks. Now, you police out there in the audience probably already know this, but depending on the hat colors, you can tell who's there and what the officers are doing. It was really kind of cool. So if anybody wants to know that, email me. I'll share that information with you. That's all.
Okay, Jim.
Okay, this afternoon, Human Rights Commission met, and the crux of what went on there was that there's going to be some sort of a gathering on March 24th that includes Latah County Human Rights and the high school, and regarding gun violence that's occurred recently. And so keep your eyes open for something happening on March 24th out in the community. That'll probably be a fairly large event. Other than that, there wasn't too much went on. They're also interested in how they can help with the Syringa Mobile Home Park disruption, and also helping with Sojourners Alliance. So they're working to come up with ways they can help on those two problems that are facing us. Even though the Syringa thing is actually a county problem, it's going to affect us in the city in some way in terms of low-cost housing. Last week I went to the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee meeting, and the crux of that was that a new research project has been started and was voted on to assess the flow within the two aquifers and what the extent of the water contained in those aquifers is, which is, a big piece of where we go. Knowing how much water is there is a huge piece of that, so that'll be an ongoing thing starting this next year. And there's also a study going on the turbidity of the North Fork of the Palouse River and how much treatment would be required in order to make that a viable water source. So those are the main things that are going on with PBAC right now.
Okay, Randy.
The Pathways Commission, they were asked to give some input about the block selection for the Steiner Underpass, so that was kind of cool. We got to see the different ideas there, and they talked about colors and textures and all of that, but it was really pretty neat to see how that's going to potentially look. Exciting there. So they were giving some input, I believe, back maybe to Les, maybe? But anyways, they also are kind of fine-tuning some of their goals, especially about the orphan paths and discussions about Do they want a catalog? Do they want signage? And they're kind of working through all of that. And they're working on their 2019 budget request that will come to us probably in March. Sustainable Environment Commission, my second meeting tonight, the second meeting that I've missed because the first two have coincided with city council meetings. So got some updates from Victoria beforehand. I know that the Mayor's Earth Day Award nominations are seeking those, and I'm sure on the website you can get more information about the deadlines for that. So that's all I have.
Okay. Kathleen?
I attended the Arts Commission meeting. They're in the middle of strategic planning, and they came up with their new mission statement, and Jen's working with them and also with the fire department. And so those two things those are mutually enhancing each other in this process. And so the Arts Commission was doing a good job there. Yuta Gertson came from the Idaho Commission for the Arts, up from Boise. She's the development director, and she came and did a presentation about all the different granting applications you could do and all the different things that they're doing, trying to get more things going. And then the Arts Commission wants to host something, so they had great conversation about hosting something here in Moscow. And then the public art brochure is in process because they want to make it available if you to see all the public art that we have in the area. And so 2 Degrees Northwest is coming back for that too. There's an art walk poster that's been chosen. It's the first time they've ever had a photographer on, and they'll have that unveiling. And then there's the Governor Awards and the Poet Laureate that's coming up, and that person's going to be here presenting. And then I also attended the Chinese New Year Festival hosted by the Confucius Institute this Saturday night, and Brandy was there, and that was fun. And Dean Collar, who is part of the Confucius Institute, said that they have renewed the relationship with the university in China, and so that's a 5-year relationship renewal. So that's a big deal for us in the university.
Great. Ann?
Planning and Zoning Commission met last Wednesday. There were a couple of standout items, one of which being that they reviewed some zoning code revisions, and one exciting change is that they're moving from a narrative to a table format. So if you ever tried to find anything, you have to go through quite a bit of text, and this is a lot more easy to read and accessible, which is, I think, a really great development. And then there also was some language, recommended language to the comprehensive plan from the library. And one really, I thought, great thing from that is they're talking about a makerspace possibly. If any of you have been to the one at U of I, it's very popular. It's basically you can come in and utilize their tools, utilize their space, their 3D printer, and unfortunately it's not open to the public. So I think that could be a really great resource in the community. And then Smart Transit met today. We had a couple visitors, so one of which was a UI employee who has been tasked with the upcoming survey, and so he talked about what will go into that, asking for demographic info, really asking if we want to expand and add a 3rd route. And if we wanted to do that, so we have had a surplus the last couple years, and some of that money could be used towards that project. We also had an audit presentation from Hayden Ross, and they reviewed 2016 and 2017 financials. Those looked good. Everything seemed to be on track. And lastly, a board member brought it to our attention that there was a bus company out of Spokane that has closed down. And so there's the possibility of acquiring a bus for much less than we would have to pay if we bought it new, 3 times as much. So don't want to get too hopeful about that yet, but that could be a really big savings for that organization. And that's all I have.
Nice. Association, I had a board conference calls. I had one on February 9th, 15th, and 16th, and talking about all kinds of legislative stuff. And we got 2 people in our area that's really been helpful, Carolyn Troy and Dan Johnson out of Lewiston, who's been really great. I've had a lot of information back and forth with both of those people on things that we're opposed to or things that we like, and so I've got good information back from them. And I reached out to Dan because and he's pretty on top of it, so we'll see how it all turns out. Tomorrow we got State of the City address at the Best Western, so I'm looking very much forward to that, so we can show the folks where we're at. And with a whole bunch of slides and presentations, I'm really stoked about that, so that's always a fun day. And then March 1st, we'll have a food insecurity coalition meeting in here in this chamber as well. So with that, Gary, I'll go to you.
I have nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are closed at 9:27. Thank you, everybody.